Someone this morning brought up, well, why would they target kids? Why would they attack the SNAP program? Why would they attack food stamps? Why would the government do such a thing? Disclaimer, my name is Waffles, and I'm a government whistleblower turned political commentator. Now, I'm just expressing my opinion here, but I would assume that the purpose is to target people who cannot likely defend themselves. I'm pretty sure, and I'm just expressing my opinion, that Donald Trump and Elon Musk and Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott and all of them have been defrauding the United States federal government through our federal agencies. Okay, if they're taking money from the welfare programs, it's a known thing. I wouldn't say it's well known. I would say there needs to be more public awareness surrounding this, but people committing fraud tend to target people who do not have the means to legal defense, who cannot afford a lawyer. So from a rational standpoint then, if there is some sort of conspiracy to defraud the United States government and individuals defrauding the United States government and stealing tax money, then welfare recipients would make a great target, because one would assume that they're probably not able to afford legal defense. And that's why they would target the children. I wrote a whole book about what's been going on at our federal agencies during the Biden presidency, and Biden himself stood behind the podium and said that Donald Trump was calling the Congress and telling the Congress to interfere with presidential actions. Okay? Trump left office, he had people on the inside, and that includes Mike Johnson, who started, I'm pretty sure he took up speakership in 2023. We wonder why Elon Musk would go running in to suddenly mess with the computers at our federal agencies. $2 to $3 trillion went missing at our federal agencies during the pandemic. I was working at the Department of Labor. I'm a witness, and I'm also a victim of these crimes. Okay, my food stamps have been shut off 3 times during the period of this. I have documentation. So I'm pretty sure they went tampering around to see what they're likely to get away with, first of all. There's signs of computer hacking that was going on in regards to our immigration systems. If you look at the backlog report in the beginning of my book, which is available for free through my bio, I wrote a whole report on what was going on at our federal agencies while Biden was in office. And it was Donald Trump who was orchestrating that. He was literally calling the Congress during Biden's tenure to tell them not to fund our federal agencies. Okay, when our agencies are not funded, we have what's called the backlog. That's cases that are being ignored, cases that are not being resolved, cases that are not being investigated. And considering that $2 to $3 trillion in fraud went missing from our federal agencies during the pandemic, and Donald Trump continues to defund our federal agencies further and further to the most extreme extent. If you're paying attention like I am as a victim, what I'm noticing is they're doing everything possible to make sure that people like me, who had money stolen from us, are not able to do anything about it by making our situation worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. Okay, when I'm freaking out because I can't get food and I have evidence of fraud, I'm trying to figure out how to get food instead of handling my legal case. Standing in line at the food bank or whatever. Dealing with crisis after crisis because they are targeting specific demographics, and that is women, minorities, and children. So if a financial crime is taking place, then it is important that we pay attention to the demographics of the affected populations in order to discover the fraud. And when we want to dehumanize the victims and call them the poor or whatever, I think it's very important, first of all, that we remember that we had a pandemic and nobody was able to, a lot of people were not able to get their benefits when applying for welfare assistance after the government, under Donald Trump's control, literally forced people to shut the doors on their businesses, forced people out of work, destabilizing our government, making it very easy to get away with financial crimes while everybody's running around in a scramble, scratching their heads, trying to figure out how we're even going to operate. Why children? because they're not able to legally defend themselves. Why women? You know, women were pushed out of the workforce during the pandemic. They were the larger affected, disproportionately affected population that was trying to get assistance from the unemployment program, where there was a significant amount of fraud. And by defunding our agencies, it makes it so that that fraud cannot be discovered because there's not enough manpower to discover it, where it went. By running into our federal agencies and suddenly messing with the computers, that's a great opportunity to conceal where the money went, try to reroute bank account numbers, etc. Now, I'm just expressing my opinion based on my observations, but that's certainly what it looks like is going on here. So then, when we refer to these people as the poor, it's no different than what Donald Trump has been doing. You see, by all of the slander and jokes that Donald Trump has been making towards women, you know, women are like half of the population. They lean the most heavily on our welfare programs because of the fact that we still have income disparity. We still don't get paid fair wages for equal work. And it was women who largely needed to lean on unemployment during the pandemic, where a significant amount of money went missing. They are the victims. And by discrediting them and making it so that nobody hears them, nobody listens to them, nobody pays attention to the victims, and they're not able to get legal assistance, the fraud will not be discovered. $2 to $3 trillion is a lot of money. I mean, if somebody stole that amount of money, wouldn't that make it the largest fraud scandal to ever take place in world history? So then when I'm out here pointing out things like, what's her name, Joni Ernst making statements about people, we're all gonna die one day. Lindsey Graham saying we're killing all of the right people. I can only assume that, you know, by making it so that the people that they literally stole the money from through our federal agencies, in my opinion, cannot do anything to defend themselves because they're being forced into poverty so extreme that they could die. Well, if they die, then they're forever silenced and the fraud will never be discovered. Sounds like the crime of the century. Yeah, it's not the poor. That's the issue. It's that we have government programs that exist for a reason, and the economy is being deliberately destroyed. In my opinion, it appears to be deliberately getting destroyed. And there are specific victims that are being targeted. And I think it's an attempt to silence the victims, discredit the victims. And I think when we speak about these issues, we need to understand that other Americans are other Americans, and these could be anybody. I mean, there were people who were some high rollers that I talked to that had to close their doors on their businesses because of Donald Trump's pandemic. So then, has the United States economy recovered from the pandemic yet? Has that happened yet? They're just trying to make it impossible for the victims to be able to speak out. The victims themselves don't even understand or know what really happened here. I mean, I'm sure there's an extent to which people are starting to understand, but that's something nobody's talking about, something nobody's looking at. Where did all the money go during Biden's presidency? You know, Donald Trump wants to create crisis and then pretend that he's the savior of these crises. Well, you know, Biden straight up told the American people that Donald Trump was calling the Congress during his presidency. There's a lot of suspicious things that have been going on, and just turning a blind eye, you know, just like Donald Trump standing on stage right before the inauguration saying, I wasn't going to be your president, but then we rigged the election and now I'm going to be your president. It's on the end of every one of my YouTube videos. That was right before the inauguration. You think he says these things for no reason? You know? To me, that's an admission of a crime, and I'm just expressing my thoughts and my opinions based on my observations. But from my own perspective, that's an admission to a crime that should warrant criminal investigation. And for some reason, people always want to try to justify these things like, oh, no, that's not what he meant. Well, those are the words So my cat, who has passed away, had a medical emergency, and I rushed her to the vet, and she ultimately died of dehydration. She was vomiting excessively, and she died. This was a while ago. She had to be euthanized. Dehydration is very serious for cats. Her blood was like slush by the time I got her to the vet. I took her to an ER. I took her to an animal's ER. I took her to an animal emergency place. And not once did they offer her a sub-Q. Not once did they offer any... And they even make mention of the fact that she was being rehydrated. Not once. And she went back home with me without any appropriate treatment from a veterinary hospital that was so concerned with giving her oxygen rather than even addressing the fact that she's puking so much that she's getting dehydrated. So, yeah, obviously I'm not happy. I did my research and found out that places that commit fraud, people that commit fraud, they target people that are in an emotional state, the whole conversation that went on for 2 hours while my animal is literally dying, trying to figure out, arguing about oxygen instead of doing anything about the fact that she has been vomiting all day. I learned, I went and did research after finding out that this place has been literally, killing people's animals. Looked at the comments and stuff that people were leaving online on this place. And I found out that people who are committing fraud are going to target people who are in an emotionally heightened state, places like medical care, vehicle emergencies, stuff like that. Emergency situations tend to be a hot spot for fraud. And I also found out, because I've only been living in this area that I'm in for the last 3 years. I just recently moved in here, and I noticed that, every time, I try to get help with stuff and get services, it really seems like people are up to some shady shit. I'm like, why is it that a whole town has, shady-ass crap going on? I didn't have these problems before. Well, I'm in a more impoverished area where people are not so financially well off, and I'm like, well, why would people who are committing fraud be trying to target the poor? That don't make sense. Poor people don't have money. Yeah, they don't have money. They can't afford a lawyer. That's why. People committing fraud target people who cannot afford to defend themselves. And so we have a worsening problem that is not getting better. And I do believe that these criminals, if I'm reading this kind of stuff, if I'm educating myself on this kind of stuff, these people know what they're doing. They know who their targets are. Okay? They know that by taking advantage of people in certain demographics, people in certain areas, etc., that they are more likely to get away with fraud. Because our judicial system is a joke. Because the law has not been getting enforced for quite some time due to the systematic defunding of our federal agencies, which has been going on for the last several years. And that's why we need to pay attention to the demographics and be careful about how we talk about other Americans, because from my own observations, after writing a whole book and doing a whole investigation, when you work for your money and your employer steals from you, for example, there's a whole documentary on it about wage theft and our federal agencies not enforcing the laws against wage theft, particularly in California and Florida. That's money that got stolen. That's fraud. If an employer steals money and somebody files legal action, then what the government should be doing is enforcing the law. But that's not been happening. So then why is it that people are poor? Why is it that people are not able to afford to survive? Is it that there's something wrong with them? Because when we refer to them in a dehumanizing manner, like calling them the poor people, why are they poor? But other than that, when we just there's something about that really bothers me, and it's the way it comes across. It creates a separation between them and us, which is the same thing that Donald Trump's been doing, and it makes it so that people are just assuming that things are this way. And then what you're doing is you're not looking at the crimes that are being committed, and then the crimes that are being committed are not being resolved, and then the criminals are going to keep doing the things that they're doing because we're looking the other way. and ignoring the issue by endorsing separatism. No, these are other Americans and people who have worked very hard for their money and work hard for the things that they have, who are being taken advantage of and having things taken from them by criminals. And it is the criminals, in my opinion, who should be held accountable. I'm just expressing my thoughts and my opinions based on my observations. That's what I have to say. Thank you for your attention to this matter.